to also contribute to the discussion in terms of how can we strengthen media coverage of Africa's, continuing transformation. And to help us digest this interesting topic, I'd like to invite our three panelists, starting with Diana Sang from Digital Impact Alliance to come to the stage, followed by our very own Mr. Victor Bwire from the Media Council, and Benon Oluka from Global Investigative Journalism Network. Please do clap for them as they come. Keep clapping until they get to the stage. In any order. Makofi. Excellent. Oh, very well. It's me again, guys. Think of this like your normal TV show. So thank you very much, everybody, and very good panelists for, first of all, making the time. I'd like to just give you, just 1 minute first. Sorry? Okay, 1 minute to introduce yourself and what your organization does. Just 1 minute first, and then we'll go into the discussion. I'll start with you, Victor, since you're closest to me, and also my namesake.
Yes, I'm second to Masarik.
Master, yes.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Victor Bwire, a trained and practicing journalist. But currently, I work at the Media Council of Kenya as the Director for Media Training and Development. The Media Council is both a media regulator and a media development institution. So largely, the issue of trainings, accreditation, certification of journalist trainings, development of short curriculum, media monitoring, and the rest, and obviously policy-related issues, development, advising government and other institutions on policy and communication sector, and the rest. The rest we do normal journalistic work. We love, write, and just make fun of life. Thank you.
Asante sana. Diana?
Thank you. My name is Diana Sang. I am the Africa Director at the Digital Impact Alliance, which is an NGO that supports, we work largely with the government, but then also with other ecosystem players to make sure that as we design technology, and in this case, DPI, we make sure that it's really designed, it's implemented, and it's governed in ways that really put people at the center. It's great to meet folks from different countries here. We're doing a lot of work in Ethiopia. We've done some work in Uganda. We are currently active in Nigeria and Benin. So it was good to see some of those reflections on how the media coverage on DPI is looking like. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Benon.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Benon. The full name is Benon Herbert Oluka. I work with the Global Investigative Journalism Network as the Africa editor. And our work is largely to build the capacity of journalists who do investigations. We don't do the investigations ourselves, but we help those who do investigations build their capacity in different ways. I also have, so I'm here with, you'd say, in wearing two sets of shoes. The other one is I have a passion project called Menterprise Africa. And the idea is we are trying to do coverage of innovations and enterprises, tech-driven enterprises across the African continent. And that is where sort of there is a connection between what I do and my passion. And if you, the organization that I'm talking about is called Menterprise Africa. If you just go to the website menterprise.africa, you should be able to find that organization. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Benon. I'll just start with you because you already have the mic and you've suggested some things which you already...
We all have mics. Go ahead.
Yes, you've spoken about some of the work that you do in terms of capacity building, but I mean, generally the question is, we are trying to see how do we strengthen media coverage of Africa's digital transformation, and from where you sit, what should we prioritize? Are there, what would be your top 3 issues or aspects that we need to prioritize in order to strengthen media coverage?
Yeah, I think the easy answer to this question would be build the capacity of journalists, train them to do more reporting on digital public infrastructure. Also, do some media literacy work such that the public gets to know more about what digital public infrastructure is and why they should care. So that would be the easy way to talk about it and say that's how to improve coverage of digital transformation issues. But training alone does not solve the whole challenge. It's just a starting point. So the work that CIPESA is doing with Co-Develop to set up this fellowship, to make sure that there is a footprint of journalists who are doing this kind of reporting on digital transformation issues across the East African region is a starting point. But there are other things we can do. And one of them is to ensure that journalists generally align their reporting with the national, continental, and global benchmarks on digital transformation. So you have if you started even at the political party level, every political party has promises they make that when we get to power, this is what we intend to do. Uganda has an election. Kenya will soon have an election. So if you're somebody covering elections, you should be thinking, what are these political parties promising to do? Tanzania has an election, and South Sudan has always promised to have an election, but 12 years down the road, we're still waiting. Yeah, but seriously, so parties will talk about in their manifestos what they promise to do for, among other things, the digital transformation in their countries and the public infrastructure that they're developing. We should begin from there to say those benchmarks, do they align, for instance, with the UN benchmarks for how society what kind of digital infrastructure society should, when we are covering, for instance, the police, we normally say there's a policeman there should be a policeman for every, is it 500 people? If we're covering the health sector, we say there should be a doctor for every number of patients. And if we are covering education, we say there should be a teacher for this number of pupils, or there should be per class, there should be about 40 pupils per class. That is the benchmark. Now, are we covering DPIs or digital transformation in the same way? If somebody is developing a national ambulance service, what is the minimum time within which they should have should have access to an ambulance if they get an emergency? So if there's a system that has been developed and it says it serves people, how soon should somebody have access to an ambulance? I think in the UK, they are trying to go down to below 5 minutes. Rwanda, the last I saw, was looking at 30 minutes. So there are those benchmarks where you can say, what is the state of our country's digital infrastructure? What can it provide within a certain time frame? And what is the international benchmark? So that's one thing. The African Union has what is called a digital transition strategy for Africa, 2020-2030. And with things like digital health, education, agriculture, governance, I think reporters should be able to acquaint themselves with such documents such that they're able to benchmark their reporting of what is happening in their respective countries on what has been agreed at continental level, at the global level, and then, I think that anchoring your reporting on such benchmarks will help people to have something to refer to when they're doing their reporting. When they're reading your story and when they're holding government to account. Two, the issue of covering local innovations and tech enterprises in our countries. Most times many innovators go ahead of their governments. And I think that's why they're called innovators. They develop new things that even their governments are not thinking about. So, and those things they develop will eventually end up serving society and making life easier. A very quick example, the easiest to refer to is mobile money. How M-Pesa innovated, and then the government had to catch up with its the regulations and all that, the legal framework. So we should be looking out for such innovations. What's happening in telemedicine? What's happening in provision of education digitally? What's happening in agribusiness or agripreneurship? If we do that, then we are able to bring to that to shine the spotlight on innovations that people should stand up and take notice. The other one is looking at infrastructure gaps. So there will be, when this infrastructure is being developed, the digital infrastructure, there will be certain gaps. There will be social inclusion, exclusion. There will be issues to do with, are we able to provide services for everyone? If you're pegging payments to maybe taxes, if you're pegging payments to government services, to M-Pesa or Visa cards, have you developed the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that is able to serve everybody, or are you excluding certain parts of society from accessing the services? So I think if you want to strengthen that coverage, we should be looking at such things, ask the questions that should be able to get those in public spaces uncomfortable, get them to think through some of the difficulties that people are facing, and then they can devise solutions. So those, for me, would be the three things that we should be looking at in a bid to strengthen media coverage of digital transformation in East Africa and beyond the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting point. So I'll turn to you, Diana. Same question. What do you think? Where should we start in terms of strengthening?
Thank you. I think for me, I feel like sometimes we focus too much on the technology and not the impact or the value. And I feel like we should shift our perspective and the focus to really understand the human side of DPI. And I feel that is where the media and journalists are really well placed, because it's to bring in the human perspective through stories, and to help meet the gap between the public servants, the technologists, and the citizens. DPI is complex, but I still feel like it's not more complex than any other topics, not even more complex than M-Pesa, for example. But I think because the story has been shaped and led by the technologists, I think that's where the problem comes. For instance, if we look at M-Pesa, which is a commonly known example, you won't find a lot of stories and talking about M-Pesa is made up of 3 layers. There is the wallet, and then there is the USSD interface. There is an API that does this, but everybody understands M-Pesa. It's a way to transfer money from where you are. You don't need to travel. It's cheap. It's in your... And I think sometimes for the population, that's what they need to understand. They don't need to understand how an API works. There are technologists who can focus on that, the same way you have medical journalists. I don't know if they are technology journalists, but there are those small spaces where you can have people who are really looking into the technology and the science behind it. But I think for the masses, one mistake I feel that we made in the ecosystem, those who are really driving DPI, is too much focus on the tech and not on the people. Technology is a means to an end. DPI is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. Once you've registered 20 million people on Maisha number, that is not success. Success is what have they been able to do now that I have Maisha number. Now that I have, I'm on this national payments platform. And if that is not clear and citizens don't understand that, then it's so hard to start to explain that, there's a digital data exchange layer, and this, how do you bring that to the rural communities? How do you explain that to the wider population, those who are digitally, not literate? And within the journalism space, this is a new space for me. I have not interacted with journalists much, but I can imagine new things are coming up for you every now and then. Tomorrow something comes up, and you kind of have to be an expert in that quickly to know how to ask the right questions, to know how to. Now it's DPI. Slowly, AI is becoming the next thing. Next year, I think we'll be here and we will not be talking about DPI. It's now AI. Will you then quickly become AI experts? And then after that, become... So I think there's a balance to see what is the media fraternity and what a journalist's best place to do. You are best placed to tell the stories, to humanize these technologies, to demonstrate the value. Still sticking with M-Pesa as an example, I remember during, for the Kenyans in the room, when we started with Huduma number, there was a time we were even being threatened to go and, get your Huduma card. Those are days, I think there was a time they put a holiday. If you don't get your Huduma number, if you don't get registered, you will not do this, you will not do this. We were being threatened. Have you seen people being threatened to go and register for a SIM card? And they are paying for the SIM card. They're not paying for this because they understand the value of the SIM card. They don't know how it works. They don't know the layers and the technologies, how many but they know I can send money to my grandmother in Kericho instantly. I can pay school fees for my child. Right now, I don't need to go to the school. So how can we humanize those stories around DPI so that people can really understand what this whole DPI is? From my perspective, I don't think they need to understand how data exchange links with payments they will over time. Over the 10 years plus of M-Pesa's existence, we've come to know some things about the technology, but even me, I can't explain to you how the API links. I do not know. But here I am talking about digital transformation. So I think that's what we should do. We should focus more on what value is DPI bringing, because on this other side, I think that's a challenge that technologists face. They keep iterating, keep changing, but they're not really seeing what's the impact on the person. No, let's change this, let's tweak this, let's add this, let's... So I think bringing that people to the center and really making the conversation about people, because technology is a means to an end and not an end in itself.
Interesting, bringing people, humanizing, very, very interesting approach. And I think previously we had talked about the event-based reporting, no time to humanize. We just want to collect it's like monopoly. Yeah? When you pass go, you collect. So the journalists want to send the story and collect, no time for human-based approach, but very, very valid points there. Victor, what do you think? How do we start strengthening media coverage of digital transformation from what you see?
Thank you. One, I have worked in a newsroom and several newsrooms, and sometimes the thinking is that we put too much pressure on journalists, that sometimes it's easier to talk than implement. Because averagely, newsrooms are losing about 100 journalists every year, and it's across. So that these desks we are talking about, how many journalists do we have? That then would help us in having those specialized desks and specialized. So as we engage, we need also to appreciate that the newsroom has changed. that media is no longer the newsroom. That media is now in people's hands, in people's blogs, and the rest. So that in these discussions, if we look at it that way, then we start appreciating. Because when the study was being released, the data, you see, why is Kenya, for example, high number of stories? You notice Nation has a dedicated 4 pages on health, technology, and the rest every Tuesday, I think. Standard has a dedicated desk for technology and also, so obviously that has given it a bigger space because of those dedicated desks. The other thing that we notice also, because at the Media Council where I work, we have a curriculum actually. When Doc, you are talking about we developed a curriculum for technology and DPI reporting with, I think it's Moi University, Dr. Msakali, which we have been training journalists on reportage. During the annual Journalist of the Year award, where we award journalists in excellence, there's a whole category on technology. And Huawei's and the other people who work in technology pick up some of these journalists, take them to wherever. And they are doing very well, surprisingly. It might not be too many journalists, but their names, the endangered is here, Martin, you remember Franklin Sunday. We can name names of those guys who have really taken Kamau in technology, and they do 2 pages, 3 pages stories. Why? Because there's also to give incentives to these guys. Remember, our journalism training, Doc, has changed. That unlike some of us who are doing journalism at a postgraduate level, in Kenya, journalism starts as a certificate and people learn the same thing so that they have the nuts of bolts of journalism, but where's the content in the other things? So our universities and colleges must also start integrate that you cannot teach somebody from certificate, diploma, master's, PhD, the same news values. What will he do? They never change. So this guy, once he has been introduced to the news values and basics of journalism in his certificate or diploma, as he goes up, we need to diversify the training of journalists at a higher level, to start introducing specialized courses, so that then we have people who can write, but write on what? So that has also been missing, that some of these things, if we went to any university in this country, there's no university that teaches journalism on tech and the rest things we are talking here. So how do we then expect those journalists to know them and even get the interest? So that gap needs to be looked at. So as the council, we notice that gap is huge, because when we introduced the category on digital and infrastructure technology, the first 2 years, we got some very good story entries. The next 3 years, we never even got. They were all dismissed by the judges. There was no quality story. So we had to go back and say, what do we do? We rush the award or do what do we do? And they said, before we rush there, let's rethink. That's how we thought about a curriculum, training of journalists in that area. Then we came up with the issue of grants. We give short grants to journalists. Not at this level of a fellowship, but a grant to journalists to then work with mentors in the technology and infrastructure sector to work with them. That then gives us more voices in that area and the rest. So that has helped. The grants, the training has helped us, but the incentives has also helped, because teaming up also journalists with these experts helps. And you notice why government alone? Notice that the digital infrastructure we are talking about is a very heavy investment sector. It's huge amount of money. Huduma numbers, the e-citizens are not little money. And what happens? There's no lack of access. So we notice that the level of corruption in some of those investments is so huge that journalists cannot ignore. So you read the auditor report, you read the parliamentary investment committees, it's always scandals about those big projects. So sometimes they tie down journalists also, that the level of the money we are talking about, fiber optic, how much money did we lose? Sure. How much money, and you can e-government, how much money is involved. The computer for schools program fights among government institutions of who will lead, what's the budget involved. This cannot be ignored, even if journalists wanted to talk about the impact. So sometimes, remember also our media, even if you look at the newspaper, the print you looked at, is purely town-based. That almost all our media newspaper prints is Kampala, Dar es Salaam, and Nairobi. Now, the impact we are talking about sometimes might not be in Nairobi. So then who covers Turkana, Soroti, Karamojo? There might be stories there. But if journalists cannot access some of those areas, then again, you might think nothing is happening. So those are challenges. I was writing a speech the other day for somebody, and we were looking at this technology in agriculture, tech agriculture. And you notice Kenya is leading in terms of registration, the numbers. But these are briefcase startups that start, somebody gets money and disappears. So that even if you wanted to talk about the good things it's doing in health, then what, you end up being forced to write a corruption story in that thing, because now the guy disappeared with the tech even. So again, we must also appreciate the circumstances the journalists are working in. They will really want to write about those positive things. But where are they? If you are following this impact on health of drones and what, then the first thing you get, this guy was given $10,000 and he disappeared. Do you ignore it and continue with the impact? So again, those are also issues. Then the other thing is engagement. That these meetings we do and engage at our level, we are very literate. The civil society, but how many other people are literate about some of these things? That at what level do we engage with these journalists? Because I see, like in elections, for example, in AI, a lot of the supporters National Development Institute, Ford Foundations, Open, they spend so much money on media and elections, on media and other things in terms of engagement training. But how much do we, the tech and the infrastructure investment is spent on media, for example, in terms of engagement, not bribing them, but engagement. Because remember, if I've done journalism, I never heard about DPI up to my age. If you don't help me understand the digital literacy you are talking about and media literacy, then I will remain the guy. You saying so those are also things that we must also, as we talk about some of these, invest. Because I've asked, because the ministry where the institution I work for falls there exactly, Ministry for Information, ICT, and Digital Highway. It has a very long name. So and I see even the fights within the institutions. There is Communication Authority of Kenya, there's ICTA, Skonza City, there is UWard. They are all on this thing, and the amount they are mentioning. But if you ask them, then how much money in this is meant for media engagement, for media sensitization, to understand all these fiber things you are doing? They tell you, those journalists, they will come for a breakfast meeting. So you call somebody for a breakfast meeting, largely 3 hours, in a room like this. The man has not eaten for 2 days. So when he comes, he concentrates on the food. But the 3 hours you want to spend to pump a lot of so much information on technology, the man lives, he has already taken care of his stomach. But there's a trend of these breakfast meetings. Breakfast. So you come to discuss a whole fiber optic national strategy of a country, but you want a journalist for 1 hour and he must take that and go and write a big story. You know, you're expecting miracles, and miracles rarely happen nowadays. So we must also invest in some of these discussions. That before, look at people like, for example, working in HIV, elections, the amount of media engagements are too many. But look at our infrastructure in the DPI and the rest. How many people engage? So I think we need also to relook that there's so much demand, but what is the supply? Where is the information coming from? And I have worked with the TI to Transfer International as a mentor on a project that was just mentoring journalists on writing about this topic. And we saw a number of stories coming out. I can tell you a lot of journalists are eager to get specialized topics. They are eager to write about some of these things. But if we don't give them an opportunity, what will they write about? It becomes the national digital, the national infrastructure strategy for Kenya is 800 pages. So you give a journalist 800 pages to read. FM station needs 50 words. If the journalist does not get somebody to help them read the 800 words and get the 50 words for FM, even in a newspaper, the maximum you can write is 1,000 words. That's a full page you have been given, which is rarely given. But you give me a document of 800 pages. And somebody who has not been paid for 3 months, he's chasing deals here and there. He has 800. The editor is, and he's the sports writer, he's the technology writer, he's the political writer, the same guy. Something will die somewhere. So we need also to be fair to journalists, that if we don't give them the support, look at the amount of money on climate change, for example, that is going to journalists. There's a lot. People are investing, and we are seeing those stories. So I believe that if we engage well with this fellowship approach, grants approach, training approach, it would help a lot, and more than lamenting and expecting John, my friend who did political science and journalism at masters, to now write about fiber optic. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. That's very, very interesting perspective that, we actually need to invest in journalists and training and that kind of capacity building to help, bring out the stories, given the existing challenges that journalists already have. I'd like to turn to Benon. You've had, what Victor was saying, that some of these big projects end up also being corruption money pits and so on. A lot of public funds are also being lost. What can we do to also strengthen the investigative reporting, especially on these big projects who you find in many countries, the project documents are not made public, the tender documents are not made public, but a lot of money is spent. I know Kenya, for example, 104 billion on, the social health insurance, ICT infrastructure, and it's still not working today. So, but the stories we see are not talking about, going deeper. So what can we do to bring out these issues?
It feels like Victor answered that question in a roundabout way, even without you asking. So I think what I'm doing now is to really buttress what he said. When people become doctors, they start out as general doctors, specialize in something which, they'll find an area of specialization maybe they're passionate about. You'll find orthopedic doctors or even orthopedic surgeons. So even surgeons have a level of specialization. So you'll have orthopedic surgeons, you'll have people who focus on the heart, the lungs. Met somebody who told me his PhD was just focusing on this part of the arm from here up to here. And that's his level of specialization. So when I fractured my arm while out in the field at some point, I was lucky at a different point when I needed a review to meet a professor who told me, this is my level, this is my specialization, So that's the level of specialization in the medical field. Lawyers going to, commercial law and all kinds of things. Yeah, I've heard now there's construction law and that. But the challenge with journalists, as everybody is going deeper into specialization, we are asking people to be generalist journalists, much more than ever before. We're asking somebody to do a news story. We're asking somebody to do videos. We're asking somebody to be able to design graphics. We are asking somebody to be able to edit. We are asking, here you can't have a jack of all trades. You can't have what I'm calling a generalist journalist in every newsroom. So we need to focus on building capacity in I would think 3 ways. 1, building the editorial capacity. 2, supporting initiatives that try to focus on particular bits. So some of the most interesting investigations that are happening right now are by organizations that focus on bits. There's an organization called InfoNile in Uganda, which focuses on investigating issues of the River Nile Basin. And they have been able to find out that I think 70% of the River Nile Basin is owned by foreigners, not Africans. They did a comprehensive investigation of about 3 years who owns the Nile, and found 70% of it is the land on the shores of the Nile have been bought by all sorts of, There's Oxpeckers in South Africa, which focuses on environmental investigations. And that is all they do. There is something called the Private Security Network. It just does investigations on private security. and those are the guys who have been able to bust some of the biggest crimes by private companies. The siphoning of money, money laundering that's happening. So we need a lot more of that. And it should be done even with the digital public infrastructure. That should be able to have one journalist who specialize in this bit, two media organizations that become niche products, so that if somebody wants to find information on DPIs, there should be 2 or 3 or 4 organizations that they know they can go to. They should be journalists who make a name as the go-to journalists in these areas. And then, of course, the third one is incentives. There should be incentives for people to keep doing this kind of work. It could be fellowships, it could be awards, it could be grants, which enable you. Stories are very expensive. I sometimes see that a lawyer to put together a one-page document is paid, $500,000. A journalist who will do a story of 15 pages is paid $1,000 is too much. They'll be paid $100 in many newsrooms. So, but a lawyer will just put together, and yet both forms of writing have taken skill. The journalist has probably has used more skills to put together that story. The lawyer who put together a one-page document, but they're paid more. So why is journalism underrated when it requires similar skill or even more skills to do and work? So we need to think about such things. The other thing is equipping journalists with the skills that are needed. If you're talking digital transformation, digital public infrastructure, then equip journalists with digital skills. There's so much information we can now get from open source investigation. Yesterday in one of the sessions, we were sharing like a toolkit which has possibly 1,000 and more digital tools that can help journalists do investigations, really complex investigations. How many journalists know that these tools are there and that they can facilitate the investigations? That is the other thing. Then most investigations come when you frame stories as governance issues, as political issues, as economic issues. If you just look at it as, digital technology, you're unlikely to find stories in there. But if you frame them as political, economic, and social governance, you then begin to get stories, and that means you're also centering your reporting on what affects the ordinary person, because this is supposed to be a service that should benefit ordinary people. So if it's not benefiting them, then you should be able to frame it in the ways that people can make it easier for people to interpret what they were supposed to benefit from this service and how they are not benefiting. So where are the loopholes, where are the challenges, who is gaining and losing, where is the money going, because many of these things are huge contracts. But so, and what's the relation between the person giving the money out and the person receiving the money? Those intricate things are what we should be training people to look out for. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And also very useful that you mentioned that the issue of specialization. I know a couple of journalists, like even in Kenya here, guys like Larry Mado, who specialize in business reporters, have gone all the way to CNN. Now you see, I think Julian Zamboko also specializing in business news, and I think the others who have done sports and they've kept at it. And so that specialization is useful, but we don't have those ones that have specialized in tech and technology news reporters. So I think it's also an area that could be captured. I will be opening it up for questions shortly. Before that, Diana, maybe you can tell us. I know you guys are doing a lot of work, and you also know about civil society work. What are those? What is the work that you're doing that you think needs more coverage by media? And what work also by other civil societies need to be covered, in the areas that you work on.
I think one of the gaps that we've seen in the DPI world that definitely needs more coverage is issues around the governance of DPI. Issues around people's rights when it comes to DPI. Issues around inclusion when it comes to DPI. I think an example could be one statistic that surprised me when you were showing the presentation earlier was the conversation is one being largely driven by public servants, governments, and two, that a lot of the conversation is on the functional aspects of DPI. We work a lot with governments. And with all respect to our governments, with all due respect to our governments, they are not the most savvy on DPI. One of the causes, I think what Robert said earlier around how the narrative around DPI has been shaped and how it picked up in Africa. DPI really came into, I think it became popular and more aware it was heavily championed by the government of India, where, they've tried it, they've rolled it out, it works, and it works well. And they decided that this is going to be we're going to take this to the rest of the world. And I think there are a few things that really made I think how the DPI conversation started in Africa. I feel we missed a few steps because one, this is India. Yes, India is huge, but India is one country. But we're trying to compare India and Africa. Africa is a continent. We are so different. There was a project I was doing in Djibouti. I don't know if there's anybody here from Djibouti. And when I went to Djibouti, honestly, if I had gone to Switzerland, there could be no difference. Structures are different, governance is different, language is different. We look the same, but it was so different. Maybe I would have even kind of settled faster if I was relocating to Netherlands than Djibouti, because it was so different. Because things are very different. Yes, we have the African culture that unites us, but if you look at how things happen, how governance happen, how the institutions are set up, it's very different. Anglophone and Francophone Africa, I think there was somebody from DRC here. It's very different. So even for us, Africa, I think some of the challenges we're having in Africa around even just integration as a continent and having a common voice as a common is because we are so different. And of course, our diversity, I think, is also the strength for Africa. But I think that nuance needs to be put in place when you now picture, like, this is one country, India, that wants now to roll out this thing that they have done and understood themselves across all of Africa. So I think some perspectives were missing. And then looking also what I admired about how India did it, because we've been together with co-develop and others, we've kind of been in the conversation since it started. When India was hosting the G20 presidency, before South Africa is hosting it now, before it was India, they now really took charge, and then that was their time to really put India's DPI approach on the map. And that is how they scaled and drove the DPI conversations. So I think for us, and now South Africa thankfully is doing it, DPI is starting to have an African perspective. But I think we need to remember that Africa, as united as we are, we're also very different. It's a paradox. So in our respective countries, what are those unique aspects that are unique to those countries that needs to be put in place when we are talking about DPI? In a country like Chad, maybe, where there's less than not very sure whether it's less than 10% or less than 20% internet penetration and connectivity. What should the conversations around DPI there be? Because you could be talking about data sharing and data access and data exchange, but there's no digitized data because there's low connectivity, there's no... So the story in Chad will be different from the story of DPI adoption in Kenya. So I think, and I agree with my colleagues here, that I think there's a lot of, there are a lot of areas that we expect journalists to have a good grasp very quickly, to even know, because with the Chad example, they need to understand the relationship between connectivity and DPI so that they can also ask the right questions. In a place where now there's an evolution, people are talking about how do we integrate DPI and AI. So I think stories around the governance of those, coming back now to the gaps I see, is yes, the technology is important, but governance is really important. How are these systems and platforms governed? Who is in charge of, let's say, data exchange? Which is the entity that is leading it? If you have a question as a journalist and you want to ask, okay, I want to ask about data exchange, who do you go to? So I think really understanding that ecosystem around DPI, understanding the governance aspects, things like accountability and redress mechanisms. Right now, if I send M-Pesa to a wrong number, I know what I can do as a citizen. I have a right. There's even a way I can click a code and it will be reversed. If not, I call this number and I'll get my refund. There are steps I know so I feel empowered and I feel I am in control of this technology that is in my hand. If somebody appears and they have you see maybe you have duplicate Huduma numbers, or maybe you log in one day to your eCitizen and you find that you're seeing somebody, like, where do you go? So I think there's a gap there around redress and accountability and people understanding their rights that I feel could be, I think there could be more focus there. Because it is these accountability mechanisms that lead to some of the corruption that we are hearing, because there's just lack of accountability on this amount of money was invested on an ID platform. Who should you ask? Who's accountable for the purchase of the system? Who's accountable for the deployment? Who's accountable for if a citizen's data is who's accountable for that? So who should you ask? So I think the stories around that side of the ecosystem is lacking. So the people, the governance, and then the last one is around, somebody mentioned private sector today. DPI has largely been focused just on, the conversation has largely been with governments. But we know that private sector is really driving the economy. If private sector did not latch on and use and really integrate with M-Pesa, for example, I don't think it would be as successful as it is right now, but they're not in the room. So I think also bringing in those voices, including bringing journalists into the conversation, bringing private sector into the conversation, bringing community-based organizations into the conversation. I think, as you said, like somewhere in a remote area, what do they understand about DPI? How do we know when you're registering, like for digital identities? I think Namati has done a lot in some of the work they did maybe in the Nubian community. So you understand what it looks like, because there are several layers of exclusion that are there, that if you do not work with people who really understand that ecosystem, then there's a lot we're missing out. So I think there are those other areas around the technology is important, but these other areas around the governance, the ecosystem players, who is using DPI? It's not just government. Private sector should be building on DPI. Where are they? I think those are areas I've seen where it would be good to have more amplify and get conversations around.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very elaborate perspectives. I think even when we had the Maisha number, if you read the newspapers, nobody spoke about who the contractor is who is supplying the system. You just see people, you wake up one day and there are devices where people are putting their fingers, and their photos being taken by the private sector behind that, and how much they were even paid. And to imagine that after all that collection of data of 37 million Kenyans, the court ruled that, the government cannot even use it. So that loss is also quite significant. I'd like to open the floor for questions and comments. Maybe if I can see by a show of hands. Right. So we can take 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we conclude, because this is what is between us and lunch. So yes, you just say your name and organization, and also the question and who you're
Thank you very much. Peter Okello, Kipyabweri from Uganda. I'm Secretary General of the East Africa Press Councils. I just want to give a comment or two. First of all, in terms of the people that we should be targeting, in addition to the people you have put in the room, the people that you're training, I think we need to involve the media or the owners also. I don't know whether there's a plan for that, because these are the people who determine eventually what will go into their spaces. I think I recently saw in Kenya here, after a meeting nearby here, one owner of a media house wrote and directed the media house on how they should cover. And that happens across all of us in Uganda. I think it would be good and the editors, senior editors, because they should also understand these things. Because as it is, DPI sounds abstract. So if you first come across it, you may think you're talking about North Korea. If you just continue the DP, you'll find a case somewhere. Then I also agree with Oluka there about the framing of these issues. This is digital tech issues by their nature. They tend to be boring and hard, first of all, even to a journalist. So how we frame it, I think, to make people have interest and would be, for example, what Shaloka was saying there about, how about you take it from the angle of the people, the consumers of the news? What are the challenges they are dealing with in the tech space, in the digital space? Coming from Uganda, for example, I think my sister there talked about mobile money. People have issues with transactions there. They are cheated, they lose money and so on. If you did a very good expose story around there and how these things play out, I think they'll pick interest. And even the editors and so on will give space for that kind of thing. These telecos typically cheat in terms of minutes. If you invested time and resources in investigating that kind of thing and exposing it, and I think people would be interested, electricity, the billing and so on, and touch from the viewpoint of the people themselves. Then from the government side, the people that carry people's data, the digital, the IDs, the driving permits, data protection, and all the issues around there. If you took it up from there, I think it would be very, very important. And I don't want to, I could go on, but let me give chance to other people also to contribute.
Right. Thank you very much. For the next also, to just try and keep it brief.
Thank you. My name is Muthuri Kathure. I'm a senior fellow with the Tech Global Institute. Amazing panel. And I'll just speak quick comment and very, very linked to what Diana was talking about. First and foremost, I think a very unpopular opinion. I think this idea of tech desks or tech reporters might not be the best for me. And the reason is tech intersects with other spaces or other sectors in the society. How about building the capacity of that agriculture reporter or that someone who's writing about business to look at how tech is impacting that sector of the society? The reason I'm saying that is I feel like that aspect of just having a tech reporter or a tech person actually what it does, it expands the gap between the who knows and who don't knows, and even covering issues as they affect the society. And if you look at the issues that come up, are actually issues that can be covered. For example, a human rights journalist can cover things around data colonization, techno-authoritarianism, around DPI. If we continue doing that, we'll see what I saw during the launch of the Koza Techno City, talking about very funny things like, smart expressway or things like that, which didn't make sense actually to the people. But then looking at actually the impact of Koza Techno City on the people would call for the people who's covering the issues in the community. Just one thing around what Diana was talking about. I think I agree totally. When we continue talking about tech reporters, they keep covering the development part of it. If you look at it, there are three things for me. I think there's the development. We're talking about all these things that are being put in place, the development of the same, of this technology, and then the governance bit. I think what journalists are being, shown or trained or looking at is the development bit only. Talk about the praises of this new model, talk about these technological advancements, but not talk about how it's being deployed and its impact on the society. And then finally, look at how is it governed? How is it governed? What are the policies, the regulatory framework? So I think we also need to look at those three things and not just on the development bit of it alone. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next. Yes, go ahead.
Is it on? Okay. James Omadai, big. Now, mine is to just echo, Mwalimu Mudhuri here. I don't think we need specialized journalists for DPI because, as he said, if you think about it, we have DPI in health, agriculture, and many education and many other aspects of society. I think what maybe is missing is some form of training to sort of like complete the circle, because I think even right now journalists know what DPI is, but they don't know that word. They don't know digital public infrastructure, but they know eCitizen, they know SHA, they know all that stuff, and they've read. So, for instance, SHA had an issue where they were using, a format. They were using, I don't know, some form of OTP. It wasn't working. Journalists wrote about it, but they probably don't know what they're writing about is. It's called DPI. So we need to, whatever that circle, to also include data security, data protection, platform governance, platform accountability. The last thing is, we also need to put elements on the owner of the platform, which is in many instances is government. We also need to also put them to task to do public participation and include media. The reason for that is a lot of these platforms, we are not told the what, why, where. And I feel like if government and whoever owners of these platforms can put a bit of resources in that, the public can be able to better understand these platforms, their impact, and maybe have a say. You have a better say, on either future platforms or existing platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, panelist. A comment and a quick question. It was good to hear how can we
just introduce yourself, please.
Okay, I'm John Okande. I work with UNESCO. So a quick comment and a question. One is, I liked the discussions around how do we humanize DPI? And I think we are all cognizant with the fact that within the context where we are in, the only way to get attention is to talk about things that DPI proponents do not want us to talk about. And this would largely link to looking at the right side of rollout, the deployment, development of DPI, among other issues. So this could be that carrot for journalists. Let's say there is a system being rolled out and there are certain things that it sort of foregrounds or would impact by looking at the impact side of it. If it's human rights issues, marginalizing certain voices, or just negating plurality of voices within that ecosystem, that could be a story. And I think that would bring the proponents to table so that you discuss how best can we do your stories instead of just glorifying the process, which most of the time we see that this has been rolled, it will do this. And we heard about the numbers thing. We talk about we've registered 100,000 people, but you'll find less story on the impact side of that. What is the nexus of registration vis-a-vis other elements that sort of inform that particular issue or DPI process, I think. So that might be an incentive in that you look at what is not being told. For example, Huduma number. You look at what has not been done to align to certain frameworks. And that is what you report on. And you will be able to have a listening because they'll come defending, they say, oh, we've done this, we've done this. And that also allows civil society groups and other actors to look at how can we possibly do HRIAs on this, human rights impact assessment of the DPI processes, which is a discussion that has not gotten traction because we only look at develop, deploy, and we are not really think of the impact side of it. And we are seeing it around carbon issues. We're just talking about incentivizing carbon credits, but we are not talking about and what systems are being developed around this. Like now the data centers that are being built within our country, most people just hear rumors about it, but they don't know the overall economic impact. We're looking at numbers in terms of money, but we're not looking foresight, like what direct impact does it have? For example, our languages, the way we live, the way we access certain resources, among others. So just a few ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's have these two and then Mike goes very briefly so that we can.
Okay, afternoon, everyone. Mine is a comment and a question in between. I think when you look at DPI, there's the data sharing aspect, identity, and payments. It's very easy to sell payments, very easy to, data sharing, a bit complex, but digital identity, I think that's where there's a lot of issues. I think Diana mentioned Huduma number, and we all remember the saga around it. And most of these things have been extremely politicized. So how do you win public trust when it comes to some of these ideas that are generally good, but the politicization around it makes it, you erode a lot of public trust. Or let me say, a lot of public trust is eroded through the process. So when you introduce something like Maisha number, which generally should be a good thing, then it doesn't really work. I think journalism should be in-depth, should be, just covering an end-to-end, all-round reporting that is precise and in-depth. Look at eCitizen or the equivalent of eCitizen, Irembo in Rwanda, and just what they have been able to achieve. I don't think a journalist's work is to talk about, I'm in tech, but even for me, tech is complicated. I think the impact resonates more with the user. And I think we can't get out of event reporting. Event reporting must be done. In fact, people on Twitter will do it faster than you. But a journalist can come up with a longer documentary, for example. You don't have to talk about tech yourself, but you can talk to Daktari and interview him. Then he'll handle that part of tech really well, fantastic. But I think the role of journalism is to to know who are the impact players, who are the power players in this, how do I bring them together? Okay, this event has been mentioned, but how do we create a longer documentary that people now can appreciate and see it end to end?
All right. We'll take this two and then we'll come to the.
Very quickly, a question to Diana.
Okay, there's a question.
Yeah, so you raised 3 points: governance, inclusion, and people's rights. And you also brought this issue of South Africa and Chad and the differences. And it got me thinking, do you think DPI suffers a threat from state capture or an authoritarian regimes? And if yes, does that present an opportunity for journalists to almost align the two to figure out what is currently taking place in a particular context? Because I think it might be interesting for the citizens to understand. I think it's DPI, but it's actually leaning towards something else.
Right. Lastly, I think Diana, you can add the vendor lock in that.
Where are the questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We haven't had any question.
There are comments.
My name is Ivan Rukanda from Makerere in Uganda. And I think any of the three will answer my question, just because you're looking for questions. We have we've emphasized the role of government in DPI. We emphasized the role of newsrooms and the role of the journalists and the communities. But there are giants we haven't talked about in all this. We haven't talked about the tech giants, because at the end of the day, governments will adopt the technologies and they will choose how to use them in many cases because they've been influenced by the big tech companies, Meta and others, and how as governments are collecting information, as newsrooms and journalists are gathering this information and sharing it, how is Meta and others collecting that information and also using it for their own business ends? So my question is, what is the role of big tech in influencing how DPIs are influencing us as countries? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. As we respond to those comments and questions, also panelists, you can give your last word in terms of if you were to have a magic wand, what would you like to see around media coverage on DPI? I'll start with you, Ben.
Yes, I think Dr. Lukanda's question will go to Diana, because I'll leave it for Diana. I think I'll leave it for her because that's her area. But what I wanted to share about is it's interesting that we've had a conversation on digital transformation. And somehow all reference to the journalism products that we could produce are the traditional journalism products. We've talked about documentaries, we've talked about the investigations, the he said, she said stories, and all that. We have not about taking advantage of new technology to produce products that actually take this information where the audience is. You have TikTok. TikTok has the highest audience in many African countries, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, name it. But we have not made reference to those platforms. They are platforms which are waiting for journalism to happen to them. But we have left them to people to produce content which many times is doing more damage than actually being informative. So I think as we think about this, what kind of content can we produce that helps advance the conversation on DPIs, we should be talking about also what kind of new tech platforms or new technologies can we use on the information dissemination side, not just the production side? I think the production side, we handled it with OSINT tools and all that, but the broadcasting side, we haven't talked about that. So I thought we should talk about that. But it also now offers me a chance to pitch an idea to Dr. Mwesiga and Dr. Wakabi that there should be ongoing conversations. We should not wait for traditional stories for this, for information on DPIs to go out there. There should be ongoing conversations through these media platforms. And I think this can be done through, for instance, podcasts. At Menterprise Africa, I've been thinking about how can we, for instance, have podcasts or even webinars that just help people understand difficult issues about innovations, tech-driven entrepreneurship, and we can have the same for DPIs. The other thing is, so beyond, for instance, the podcasts, you can have collaborations between journalists and subject experts. I think an organization like Infonile has been able to do so much in terms of linking scientists to journalists. I now see them doing collaborative stories between a scientist and a journalist. When we talk about collaborations, many times we're talking about journalist-to-journalist collaborations. We're talking country-to-country collaborations, but we're not talking journalist-to-subject-expert collaborations. And it is one thing, perhaps, in fellowships that like this, where you can say, can we have an expert help somebody internalize these issues? Or can we have an organization like Menterprise have a platform for weekly conversations where we speak to experts and they're able to dissect the much more difficult issues that the ordinary person would not understand about tech, but they dissect it in a language that people will understand. And the questions that the journalist asking this, interviewing this subject expert will ask will be meant to demystify the much more technical information that these subject experts have. That's my really last word and pitch to Dr. Mwesiga and Dr. Wakabi. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Diana, briefly as you conclude, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't get the gentleman's name, the one by the door, around the authoritarianism. I think the question you asked, that's a perfect question. Next time a government official is talking about, ask such a question. I think it really shows that I think this has been a successful engagement because people are now seeing the right questions to ask. Those are the questions to ask. Who owns this platform? Where does the data go? Who paid for this platform? What is there any surveillance being done? Because DPI comes with a lot of data. There's a lot of data in circulation. There's a lot of data being held. And now with even on the ID side, we're going to the level of others are collecting, biometrics and, iris, fingerprints, and that's a lot of critical data. So where does that data go? The platform that we're running, is it owned by Kenya or is it a foreign company? If it's a foreign company, what are they getting from? I think that was a perfect question that you asked because those are the risks now that come with DPI. There's an increased risk of surveillance because now there's much more key data that is within the public space, within the government, in the government's hands. Yes, there is this. I think the Ethiopia ID example was good because you don't need to collect so much data. You don't need people's, but there are others who are collecting it. Where does that go? Who has access to that? Me as a citizen, what right do I have on that data? Because I do have a right on my iris details. how do I know that right? How do I practice that right? I think, Dr. Akabi, I think some of the questions that are coming, it just shows that I think this was a successful event. Even the question around big tech, those are the questions to be asking. Big tech thrives on data. The Googles, the others, all they want is data. A lot of these partnerships that they're having with government sometimes, and please do not quote me, I see a lot of cameras, these are media journalists, please do not quote me on this, but a lot of it, what they want is data. When you hear that data is oil, they understand it and they get it. The Instagrams, all of them, what their capital is data. They're getting the data and they're mining, and that is what, and we have not really understood the power of data. And I think we do not have the structures and the systems in place to really manage that data. So an example is in Europe, they have really strong, it's very hard for the Googles and the others to get certain levels of data in Europe because they have a very strong regulatory framework around it. Here, I think they already have it. They have so much already. So I think those are the questions that we need to be asking. And then when on the private sector and the big tech side, one of the early conflicting perspectives around DPI that were there, and I feel it's still there, is DPI. Does DPI mean publicly owned? And that was where the M-Pesa conversation became a global hot topic in the DPI space. Is M-Pesa DPI? And some quarters are saying no, because it's privately owned. So does DPI mean it's publicly owned, so it's the national pay, or does it mean it's universal, it's being accessed across the entire population? It's population scale. Yes, sorry. It was a debate between, is it population scale platforms or publicly owned platforms? Now we are seeing private companies, particularly in the ID space. They have ID solutions. They sell ID solutions. And sometimes governments have to be locked to a particular provider because they say, we will come and we will implement this platform. You'll run on our platform, we'll do everything. But they literally own the platform. So ownership between who owns the platform, who owns the data, I think those are some of the key questions that I think for journalists, you ask fantastic. I think that is where even, when we bring our public servants and government officials, sometimes depending on the type of journalist or type of situation they're in also determines how much they prepare. So I think if we start asking the right questions, they'll have to really make sure that they've also addressed this. Or I'm going to be asked about who owns my data. They'll have to come up, if there's no response, they'll have to, put measures in place to have a response. And I think that is a way that you guys are really well placed to keep our government in check, keep issues around governance and rights in check. You have more access to our government officials than even I do. You're able to ask them questions that it might take me hoops and leaps to get in front of a minister to ask a question, but you're able to ask those questions. So I think getting to know what are the right questions to ask is you'll really be representing the citizens, and it's going to also build accountability on the government side. I think last thing is around, it's unfortunate Robert has left, but I think this is something for Dr. Wakabi. You should challenge Robert, co-develop, they host the Global DPI Summit. There's one coming up in November where everybody, the specialists in DPI, the governments, I think a question I would ask him, is the media there? And what type of access do we have in terms of the different scopes of media? A bloggers, there are different types of journalists there. Do we have good Africa coverage, or do we have foreign media houses coming to? I think those are some of the key places that we need to make sure that we're also including this group so that we know that we're addressing the right issues.
All right, thank you.
Victor. The good thing I work for a public institution and I don't know some of those things even. So even if we were to ask those government officers are equally ignorant, I can assure you. Some of those discussions are held so far that some of the public servants only end up either preparing speeches and but if we went inside what it means, you will find there's nothing they know about. So many of these things are budgeted corruption by private companies who have very private interests, but they will use public officers to get what they want. So that you find that even Victor here, I have a media monitoring machine because we monitor all the media outlets in Kenya and what. It came from Brazil. I don't know even who. We are told, you want a media monitoring machine? Yes, we will be secured one for you. So I even don't know how much it costed. So it is there. So if you ask me the details of that machine, I might not know. We noticed that after some, they told us it can host data, the server, for 3 years. We noticed once we start using it, it overrides after 3 months. So while people think Media Council has this data, huge data on media, you come, you remember you are doing your study, I couldn't get you anything, because, and that is the same thing at CIA, the Communication Authority of Kenya, CCU, they give us machine, because of the pricing, they tell you it will keep data for 3 years. Practically, it can only keep data for 2 months. It overwrites, there's nothing. But the money has already been budgeted and eaten at a level of 10-year storage, you see. So those things are happening. We were given one from Germany for monitoring the newspapers, the print. That thing, even if it's loose, they charge you for what, certificates, you for what, so that you find you have an infrastructure that you have no control, zero. Even if it's just broke down a simple thing, you have to call German, the manufacturers. So you just find that not. We went back to employing human beings. Now we have 35 media analysts, physical, because the machines, we have no control. There's nothing. It breaks down something small, you are stuck. So even the worry here, why do we reapply for a passport when your passport expires? This government keep no data, I can tell you for free. You have to apply afresh. Because the capacity serves to keep data for 52 million Kenyans. It's not there. But they will make you believe that the data is there. That's why we are going to Huduma number, Mara's which number, Mara's ID. We have now smart driving license. The information is the same, but we have too many because they can't retrieve this data. So some of those fears are there. But what I see, to me, going forward, like we are trying it at the East African Press Council, where Okello is the secretary. That why do we need data for journalists in Kenya, in Uganda, in Tanzania, when we are talking about East African communities? If I've already been accredited in Kenya as a journalist for Uganda or Rwanda or Tanzania, I need just to go to Rwanda and work or do my assignment and come back. So we are harmonizing the accreditation to also minimize on the level of requirements of somebody documentation. You carry too many documentations for just the same thing. So that's we are trying and we're working. I think it's a World Bank thing about data and this, that how do we harmonize and give less, logistical problems to journalists. Apply for a visa, apply for a passport, apply for a press card. It's too much for. So that, and it's working. The East African community has shown a lot of interest because they are working on a digital something identity for East Africa. So you can always see even government themselves keep secret from each other. So Uganda is running a national ID project, Tanzania is running a national, Kenya, but at the East African community, they're also running an East African ID project. That once you get one ID, you don't need this in-country IDs. So you can see the level of privacy and secrecy in this sector also makes it so difficult for journalists to remain to be debating on events. Because they manage it so well. The events on most of these digital related things is the president gracing it, is the minister. They are very high level, so that journalists cannot ignore them. They also know that. But it ends at the level of signing of contracts, 10 billion shillings project. So which journalists will ignore a 10 billion project? They will go and write about it. But now once it goes the implementation on the other side, it becomes. But I see opportunities to me. And like you just said, that also we are still so stuck with traditional media to a level that if a story is not run in New Vision or Monitor, then the story has not been covered. Yet the digital platforms, as we are saying, are the biggest. I know of digital platform here, which one just digital has over 3 million followers. Which media house traditional has such? Zero. So again, we as the people also interacting with media must know the media scene has changed. The way we communicate, the way we want things to be known outside there has changed in a big way, that we must also open up and say the next study, Dr. Mwesige, we should not just be about newspaper coverage. Should be other platforms. We have independent content producers here who are doing fantastic work on that sector, which needs to be integrated and appreciated. That's one thing I have seen. The other thing is now the use of the user-generated content. The specialists, how many of you are writing? How many of you are ready to even go to TV programs to talk about these things? That many of us are locked. We are experts on IT, on tech. So we are serious people. We can't deal with going to media and making noise. But you deny yourself an opportunity to help people understand what we are working on. So let's also go out like politicians. A politician will never miss a space, even if you wake them up in the night, they have nothing to say. But even just coming and saying I'm the MP for whatever, is just enough, But most of us will start talking about I'm not prepared. If you have been working on tech for 10 years, what preparation do you need again? So that's also attitude that I can't engage media because they don't understand anything on tech. Is also denying us an opportunity to help educate people about the work and the good things we are doing. So most of our media houses have now adopted what is called the user-generated content, that we adopt what the users are giving. I write a story, then you get comments from the various experts, we integrate it. So that has also helped us in terms of expanding and enriching the articles, the content that we are having. So let's also go out there and become tech activists, not just tech specialists who sit in offices and take tea and relax. So that will, because it's a combination. Once we sit back and say it's the work of journalists to help other people know, and we detach ourselves, it will never happen. It's a combination of you, me, and others in terms of saying this is a huge investment, this is a big thing on the impact of human beings and the rest. What is my contribution in helping the other people? So Victor here is an expert. I know he has gone to court. He has sued almost everything on tech. But I've never had him on any TV station talking about anything. So, so we lose that knowledge in terms of understanding some of these issues. So let's look at this as a joint venture, that we collaborate, where, let's do the activism work, that we can tip journalists on some of the trends, because we understand some of these things more than them, because we are the subject experts. And when, Albert, I used to work as an investigative journalist for Nation Media Group undercover for 3 years. Many of the stories I was doing, I was not even looking for them. Is people who know you write on such a thing will bring documents in baskets and leave it to you and write your name on top. Most of these stories are negative is people who have lost their tenders. They are the ones who understand how fiber optic from Mombasa misses water. I don't understand. So once we also start tipping journalists in some of these, and journalists in the broader sense, not journalists in the newsroom. We have digital independent content producers. We have people who run very nice platform influencers. Let's utilize them. They will help us a lot in terms of sensitization. So the next maybe bit, look at a bigger picture on how many of these discussions are helping in our private spaces. Remember, the biggest beneficiaries of some of these DPIs are youth. How many discussions in the Makerere youth halls, Nairobi, are happening like this? Just to start recruiting the youth. Because when we're talking about digital and media literacy, largely it's the youth. But many of us never look at them. It's just the same face. Next year, I'll come here. Next year, there's no new face. So we know to expand our networks, that we must get in more people, fresh people, especially the youth, to help us in spreading some of this discussion, because they're the fastest people. Right now, if you go to most of our media houses, if a story is good in a newspaper, people take a photo and spread it in WhatsApp. This demarcation we are talking about traditional and new media is not there. It's just there for us who don't know. But many of that, I get a good discussion on a podcast. That's what Citizen or NTV will pick to start off their conversation. I get a nice clip from a TV discussion. That's what people are cutting and putting in our social media to spread. So we must also take advantage of some of these people. And more importantly, the sound clips. A number of us are good in what we do, but we don't know what media wants. We must also appreciate how media operates. If a TV station only needs 1 minute, But the tech guy, in introduction, you take 10 minutes. I'm a tech fellow, I'm a tech duo. I'm looking at this guy, why didn't he give me his story? Because I have only 30 seconds to air the story. So we must also utilize the media space in a way that helps us. Because many times, it's the way we launch our reports, it's the way we do our things that denies us coverage. Not that the topic is hard, because when we joined the newsroom, they were telling us science is hard, climate change, but people have managed to put it on page one. So tech stories are good, but look at, like Ben said, 360. There's the economic, cultural, legal issues that led to DPI. So let's not create spaces and say, demarcate, this is technology page, this is technology. But once we integrate the mainstream them in the coverage, that other people look at the ECOSOC rights, other people look at civil rights of digitization, then the story will just get mainstreamed and will do well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Let's give them a very round. I think these 2 sessions were like a masterclass that should be aired in universities and schools of journalism and all newsrooms for stakeholders to hear how we need to collaborate, how we need to change, how we engage with the media, how we must benchmark, how we must, do things differently given that is a different context. Africa is one, but we are also different. We have to look at our context very uniquely and see how technology is addressing the challenges and focus on how we can also humanize these stories to show the impact that technology brings to society. They are being lauded there as a lot of digital transformation projects, but until someone actually feels how they are affected, then it is not meaningful. And if we are not able to tell those stories, our culture is oral tradition. We have to speak, we have to tell, we have to talk. So we must encourage these stories. So really, really, really thank all of you. So let's give them a hand as they step down. As we conclude, I'd like to invite Dr. Mwisigi to come and give us some closing remarks. He introduced himself in the morning saying that he invited all of us to the meeting. So he should tell us whether that objective has been met and what he thinks, need to happen moving forward. Karibu.
Thank you all. This has been very useful for us in terms of feedback on what we are doing. And therefore, I want to thank all of you for having agreed to join us, spend time with us. I want to thank the panelists for sharing their wisdom, their perspectives with us. We are going to share with all of you. Doreen has, I think, already shared with you on email the presentation and the executive summary of the report. We'll share with you the final report as soon as it is completed. And hopefully we can build on this momentum and continue the conversation on, improving, promoting informed public debate and media, conversations on digital transformation. So asante sana. For the Kenyan colleagues who came from within, the Nairobi and the country, please maybe see my colleague Doreen before you go for lunch. She's right there. You need to come near here because yes. And then for the rest of you, the fellows, we are together here. We shall be seeing each other. So I think with those few words, should I just say declare this place closed? Then you can join us for lunch, of course. Where? Downstairs on the LG. Yeah. So asante sana. Thank you very much. Well, you are becoming like presidents. Small photos, the few of us, the three of us,
The government themselves.
Great. Come one, come all. There.
Let's come to the front for the group photo. Cameraman or the camera crew, please. Let's come and take the photo and then we'll pack our things. It will just take 2 minutes.